Welcome to the Climber Dad channel. I saw recently that the Tension crew from Tension Climbing was on the Power Company podcast, and I want to build a tension board for the gym here. I think it's a great product, so I had to listen to the podcast. And they talked a lot about home walls, and there was a lot of good validation that I was on the right track with where I'm going, and it was just so needed. Thank you, Tension Climbing and Chris Hampton from the Power Company. I really appreciate that. There was a question that was posed, and that is, how much would a DIY systems board cost? And I thought, man, I've been asked that question a lot, and I can answer that for you. So I'm gonna answer that question, plus I'm gonna talk about points of contact. I'm gonna talk about points of interest for this wall and some of the things that I would change. So sit back, relax, and here we go. This wall has a 16-inch tall kicker, and then 8 feet by 8 feet for the climbing surface. Now, the smaller that climbing surface is, the less fun it will be to get on it, and the more you have to really be dedicated to training because of the fun factor is lower. I would never build, and I would never recommend building a wall smaller than this. So if you don't have the space to build at least this size, I personally would recommend going with a hang board or something like a campus board would be really good that is more training focused. The first thing that I would change about this is I would make it 2 feet taller. So it is 8 feet wide by 10 feet tall on the climbing surface and still keeping a 16-foot kicker. Now, the next thing that I would change is the stud spacing on the back. Now, I'm gonna put up a picture here. I always design my walls off of floor framing. If you can build it for a deck, then it should work pretty well for a climbing wall. 2x4s, I've used 2x4s early on when I was building home walls, and they just don't use 2x4s, guys. If you look at this picture, you'll see 2x4s aren't even on the chart. You will thank me later if you don't use 2x4s in your build. So the next change that I would make is with the framing, I am going to run 2x8s on 24-inch centers, which will span that 10 feet with no problem. The other thing that I would change on this, and this almost irritates me, and it's because of the moon board. Dang it, moon boards. They use spacing of 20 centimeters for their T-nuts. Now, when everything that you're building around you is set up with the metric system, that's great, that's perfect. But here in the States, it's not. We go by feet and inches. So ideally, the best spacing on your T-nuts is starting your first row 3 inches from the edge, and then every 6 inches, and it lines up perfectly. But because the moon board is set up at 20 centimeters, and everybody is copying that, so Tension is copying that, and the Kilter board is copying that, just to make it easier to convert moon boards to the Tension or Kilter boards. But the next thing that I would do for the change is I would put the T-nut spacing at 20 centimeters, and that's so I can convert this board from a spray wall or systems board to a specific systems board, whether it be a moon board or a Tension board or a Kilter board. I would have that option. Now, let's talk about the points of design. I think that it is crucial to have a good quality plywood in this build. You don't want to just go out and buy the cheapest plywood that's going to fit the dimensions. Go with at least 3/4 inch thick plywood. I would stay away from the cheap OSB. OSB can be a really good product, but the cheap OSB uses cheap glue, and OSB is only as good as the glue that holds it together. This stuff behind me is called a hardwood plywood. Just bought it at Home Depot. Cost 50 bucks a sheet in my area. Baltic birch plywood is the absolute best that you can use, and that's what most commercial gyms are built out of. Okay, the hinges.
I'm using door hinges to keep these two sections together, and the reason why I'm using hinges is it makes it easier to build and a little bit more adjustable. Now, all of the weight from the upper climbing wall is not being supported through these hinges. I actually have some side brackets on here that's taking the majority of the strength of the wall, and then just a little bit is going through these hinges. If I wanted to change this design and have it be completely supported by those hinges, I would need to have a minimum of 3 hinges with at least a 1/4 inch pin. And these door hinges won't cut the mustard. I'd have to get a much bigger hinge.
The legs and the straps. You're not putting the weight directly vertical through that board, so you want to use something that you know is not going to break on you. So just use a 2x6 for the leg. I also have it coming out much further than the top lip of the wall, and the reason why is because as you're climbing you can do dynamic moves where you're dynoing up to the top, and if your base of the wall is directly below that lip where you could be doing that movement from, there's a possibility that you could rock that up. If it's kicked out away from the lip, it's not going to happen. Now the straps, I originally attached these straps using an eye bolt, and it started to actually twist the board, and I think it's actually a little bit more secure the way that I have it set up right now, which is a bolt directly through the eye of the strap. I just think it's a little bit more secure, and there's less leverage on it that's going to be twisting that board. So those are the points of design that I can think of. Now let's talk about the cost. I'm not going to get too far in depth in this cost. This board behind me, with the changes that I would like to make, is going to cost me just under $1,000 in material. That is including holds. Without holds, it's $350 in material. In the Southeast, where lumber is pretty inexpensive. And that's going to change, and it can change pretty dramatically where you're at and how much lumber costs are. So I will have a build list available on climberdad.com with instructions for a small fee, so I can help generate some funds to make this channel better. So I would appreciate it, even if you're not planning on it. If you just want to, support the channel, it'd be cool to go by that build plans. It'd be awesome. I would appreciate it. Thank you. So it takes about 8 man-hours to build something like this, and it was a very simple design. With all of that included, divided by the square footage, which is 96 square feet, you're at $12 a square foot. That is without texture. You want to include some texture on the wall, that's going to bump it up to about $13.50 a square foot. Don't use that if you're planning on, if you're making your budget for building your dream climbing gym in your hometown. It's going to cost you a lot more than that, even if you do it DIY. But for a lean-to climbing wall, you can plan on about, I'd say, $12 to $14 a square foot. Thank you for watching Climber Dad. If you've liked this video, please let me know by hitting that like button. If you're new here, subscribe. And if you're Chris Hampton or one of the guys from Tension Climbing, please let me know that you watched this by giving me a shout out in the comments below. I'll see you guys next time right here on Climber Dad.